fiery battle with cops for days, months actually, but it just turned truly violent since we've been here. Our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, is there for us tonight to start us off. Richard, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. Just last night we were talking about a truce. It didn't last long. In fact, we watched it unravel in front of us. And today was the deadliest day since this protest movement began. Around 70 demonstrators and at least 3 police killed today and hundreds wounded.
Protesters charged police lines in Independence Square this morning. Suddenly, the police were in retreat. Protesters in small groups advanced, but they were picked off. This man shot in the leg. Police fired on demonstrators, some with high-powered rifles. But then we saw the dedication that is keeping this movement alive. The protesters continued their charge, peering around corners, dodging bullets, diving for cover, recovering their wounded under fire. They paid a price for it. We watched them come back, limping, on stretchers, some unconscious, others dead. The wounded were rushed to a nearby hotel. In the lobby, a nurse tends to one man. Another couldn't be saved. It's a makeshift field hospital, short-staffed, with few supplies. A body left by the front desk. Back outside, as the shooting subsided, the demonstrators moved to take new ground while they could and build new barricades and stockpile more weapons, Molotov cocktails and rocks. The advance had been costly, but it worked. The protesters expanded their terrain.
This is the protesters' new front line. The riot police have now withdrawn from this area in central Kiev, but the demonstrators clearly worry that they could come back, and that's why they're reinforcing their defenses.
Alex, a 23-year-old financial consultant, helps guard the front line.
How do you think this is going to end? Where does this go from here?
Maybe a little more victims, I guess, but finally the democracy will win.
The war drums here are beating. There is little mood anymore for truces.
We want to destroy this criminal government.
It was the bloodiest day in this 3-month struggle against the government. The toll is written on their faces. But the opposition here is still calling it a victory.
There are still thousands of demonstrators in this square tonight, Brian, and so far it has only been the police involved in the crackdown. The army has been staying out of it. Brian?
Richard Engel, who we've watched cover combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, and now, hard to believe, the streets of Kiev. Richard, thank you for your day of reporting. Late today, Vice President Joe Biden spoke with Ukraine's president by phone. And diplomatically, of course, the subtext here isn't complex. Here we are again, the U.S. and Russia, the West and what became of what we used to call the Eastern Bloc. NBC's Andrea Mitchell monitoring all of it from our Washington newsroom tonight. Andrea, good evening.
Good evening. All of this is just incredible. The White House, infuriated, says it's outraged by the government's firing automatic weapons on its own people. But while the vice president in that call urged restraint, Ukraine's leader is hearing a very different message from Vladimir Putin's Russia. In Kiev, raucous protesters capture a dozen riot police, marching them across the square while fending off hecklers who want to lynch them. And beyond the capital, the firestorm of anti-government protest is spreading. In Lviv, near the Polish border, a government command post is taken over. But Ukraine's president is resisting all appeals from the U.S. and its allies, rebuffing a delegation of foreign ministers from Europe, ignoring President Obama. Ukraine's military even refusing repeated calls from Defense Secretary Hagel.
There needs to be mediation here, but first and foremost, the government has to pull back, not fire upon its citizens.
The U.S. has imposed sanctions on Ukraine, and today Europe upped the ante, freezing assets and banning travel visas. But President Yanukovych is listening to Moscow and Vladimir Putin. Putin's Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev even urged Ukraine to be tougher, saying so people don't wipe their feet on the authorities like a doormat. The message to Yanukovych, don't compromise.
And it's very clear that the Russian leadership feels it's their right to do what they want and not our right to be involved at all.
Tonight, European foreign ministers still in Kiev are trying desperately to mediate with both sides, hoping to avoid more bloodshed. Brian?
Andrea Mitchell in our Washington newsroom, thanks. With attention overseas.